Wait, what? I can do that? This is Eric Bell with Wait, what? Financial matters that matter for business and the people that own them. Welcome to this episode of Wait, what? Financial matters that matter for business and the people that own them. I'm fortunate to have Cole Morgan with me today, an attorney at Stuart Kane. He does corporate and commercial real estate law primarily, but today we're talking about one of Cole's specialties. Cole has worked with numerous clients in the cannabis industry, including vertical integrated companies with their commercial real estate and corporate needs. His experience includes property acquisition, leasing, joint venture agreements, corporate reorganization, structuring investments, and many other transactional matters. He regularly publishes content on issues related to the cannabis industry. Most recently, he co-authored the article, What Should You Know Before Leasing Property for Cannabis and Hemp Use. That was published in the Orange County Business Journal. Thanks for being with us, Cole.
Oh, happy to be here.
I think we should probably just jump in. And can you tell me just a little bit how you got into the cannabis? First of all, my hat's off to Stuart Kane for being one of the law firms that's jumping in on being involved with cannabis. But how did you get involved with it yourself?
End of 2015, I was approached by a friend of mine who said, "Hey, I know you do leases. Would you do my lease? Would you help me out with my lease?" And so I said, sure. And so he started giving me the details and he said, "Oh yeah, this is for cannabis." And at that time, that was a very rare practice for law firms. And so I said, well, seems like there's some, legislation coming down the road. Let's give it a shot. So I went to the managing partner and said, "Hey, can we do this lease? And by the way, it's cannabis." And he said, "We don't represent dope dealers." That was his initial reaction.
Oh, yeah. It's everybody's.
Yeah. And so I said, well, there's some legislation here, and I think, maybe we could represent them ethically. And I said, let me present an opinion on it and then see what you think. And he said, okay. So I went home, did the research, came back and presented the ethics opinion, and the managing partner and the other partners had a change of heart. And they said, okay, let's do this, but no advertising it. We don't want other clients to know. And so I went back to my friend and said, yeah, this is something we can do, but let's just not advertise it. And that's kind of how it started. Okay. From there, it exploded into all sorts of stuff.
Are there any deals right now in the cannabis area that you're working on that you can disclose or talk about?
Yeah, I can publicly disclose it because it's with Planet 13. Planet 13 is a publicly traded company, and they have to make certain disclosures so that all the shareholders and things like that are on the same page. But yeah, the Planet 13 is just big. They're known mostly for their giant dispensary in Las Vegas, and they're coming into Santa Ana and purchasing a location that is coined as the, quote, Disneyland of cannabis. It's on another level. They focus kind of on the experiential end of dispensaries. So if you ever have a chance to go down to Vegas and check it out, it's different than what you've experienced before.
What was it called again?
It's Planet 13.
Okay.
The giant red globe. And yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you walk in there and there's this LCD floor with water and lily pads, and you walk on it and it looks like you're making ripples on the ground. But, it's just next level. So they're going to try and bring that same kind of experiential concept here, not just, more of like a liquor store type atmosphere. They're really trying to go next level.
Surprisingly to me, when I went to a dispensary to get some CBD, it was like going into an Apple store. I didn't know it was going to be like that. That clean and that put together was really nice.
I think that's really what is going to be the separation between some of these dispensaries. Some are going to go for that experiential feel where they're attracting these customers that want to have a fun time while they're there. And then there's others that are just going to be merely for the transaction.
Okay.
More like the liquor store. But
what are some of the issues that cannabis businesses struggle with, mostly right now? What would you say some of the big issues are that they're struggling with?
I would say that the two biggest issues, based on what at least I receive calls, on a daily or weekly basis, are probably surround mismanagement of funds and, running into trouble with the governmental agencies, inspections and things like that. Going to the mismanagement of funds, when the cannabis industry started, and especially when it was legalized in California, anytime you mentioned that you worked in that industry, funding was, I would say, pretty accessible. People were getting large amounts of funds, and what did they do with those funds? They started spending a lot of money, expanding, and not just within the state, but sometimes expanding out of state and throwing a bunch of people on the executive board. And it was a lot of obligations that were put on the company. Once that capital dried up or stopped coming in, they were dependent on their revenue streams, which are tough. They didn't outweigh how much obligations they had out there. So I'm getting calls from landlords saying my tenant can't pay rent. I'm getting calls from, a deal we did selling a license where the purchaser is having trouble making their payments for the license. And so both of those surround, I think, an overexcitement of what the industry could do for those companies. And from a legal perspective, we negotiate how, if there's a breakdown, how that's going to be dealt with. But you hope to never be there in the first place. So how we try and manage that is, okay, which party has maybe the better experience in managing these kinds of high growth companies? Who's going to be responsible with it? And with the agreements, trying to put the money in the control of the person who has that experience.
So they have CFOs, or how are they running? Is it just a group of guys, and you're going to be the CFO, I'm going to be president? Or are they finding real CFOs to help manage and be strategic?
Company by company. There's really, I think, two types of main businesses. One is the guys who have been growing weed their whole life,
right,
and now trying to go legit.
Okay.
And then the other type is the corporate, maybe real estate business that is now transferring into the cannabis industry. So if you're taking the first guy who doesn't have a lot of experience with the business end of it, if they don't bring somebody on board who has that experience or isn't very good at getting up to speed with maybe the business aspects, they're probably going to struggle. And so one of the struggles they have coming from the industry is, well, I need all these people on my board, a CFO, I need a CEO, I need everybody to run the company, and they'll go out and try and hire a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
On the other end, and I mean, with my experience, this company usually has more success. Those who come from the non-cannabis industry transfer in and sometimes acquire somebody from the cannabis industry. So they need a cultivator, a master grower. They'll go out to that industry and seek one or two people that they need. But most of the business is a business.
Right. Business is business. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There have been some companies that have been very successful that have transferred from illegal to legal, but in large part, most of them are struggling for, again, mismanagement reasons.
We probably have some listeners now who have different businesses but are looking at diversifying into this space because it's going to be probably a pretty popular space once it goes federal.
Right.
Yeah.
Once it goes federal, I think there is going to be a big boom with all the new money that can now be invested into the industry.
Right.
So, there probably will be. I don't want to say this is investment advice or anything like that to your listeners, but I think there will be. There's a huge distinction between if you're investing in a public company and a private company.
Right.
A public company, if you're just looking online and see some over-the-counter stock and invest in it, that's pretty far separation from that company.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're investing into a private company, that's a whole different avenue.
Whole different level of risk.
Whole different level of risk.
Right.
That's right on.
Yeah.
So if you're going into that company, you better know what that company's about, because the ultimate failure that you don't want to be involved with is, turns out this company's working with the cartel or distributing to minors or distributing across state lines. Now the federal government's going to be on the case, and you have ownership in that company.
Mm-hmm.
And you've given your social security number to the state, so they know how to find you. They know a lot more about you than you think. So if you're going to invest into the private industry, you got to figure out first if you want to be in it, and then do your due diligence on this company from the ground up. Know the people in there, know their values, know their systems and processes to make sure that they're not going to be in that situation, where you're going to be at risk.
So you're investing in a private deal. So you're looking for a private placement memorandum, or how does that work? Mostly with cannabis. What should an investor expect when they're investing in the cannabis industry? How do they go about that, or what's the process?
Well, normally? In any business, you need to do your due diligence.
Right.
So, the process is first, I guess, finding the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Once you found one that you like, and of course, before that, making the decision you actually want to be in the industry. Once you found that, you start digging into the details. The first step is checking if they even have a license. A lot of companies out there, we're a cannabis industry, we have a license. Well, okay, let's see it. And they'll give you a number. You can check it out online and see, okay, does this company actually have a license? Many of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
In LA, there were 800 and plus dispensaries, only 130 of which, and it went up to about 170, of which were qualified to apply for the actual license. So you have 600 and some dispensaries out there that are illegal.
Wow.
I'm sure they're still requesting funds from people, and people are probably still providing those funds to this illegal business.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's step one.
I'm surprised the police or the government didn't crack down on that harder than they have, because so people are buying pot from
Yes.
unlicensed places.
And to your listeners, don't buy from
Right.
those places.
Well, how would you know?
Well, they should have their license on the outside of the business.
Is
They
that okay?
should
All
have
right.
it posted out there.
All right.
So you can tell that way. They should have a way to find the legal name of the business that you could actually look up on there, on the state website.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how to protect the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if they're posting fake licenses and things like that, that's an issue. That's a problem. The crackdown on these dispensaries is happening, just not as fast as it should. That's a priority, but it's difficult when you have that many illegal shops out there.
Now, as an attorney, are you working mainly with dispensaries, growers, or all the above?
All of them. I mean, like I said, from seed to sale. So I've represented cultivators, distributors, manufacturers, retail, all the way
Okay.
through.
Okay.
Yeah, each one of them has a different perspective on the industry, but most of them have the same problems
Mm-hmm.
that we discussed earlier: mismanagement, and then the governmental agencies cracking down on them for not following the rules.
Now, I know you're licensed in California, but as other states take on cannabis and it becomes legal in that particular state, could you collaborate with attorneys in other states to help them through this
yeah.
process? Okay.
Yeah, I've collaborated with attorneys in other states, including the Planet 13 deal we talked about.
In Nevada. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's Nevada across state lines. They're trying to move their operations over into this state.
Mm-hmm.
The big no is you can't distribute the product across state lines. Each state has their own world where the cannabis has to stay inside of those lines. Once you go across state lines, now you violated federal law big time.
Mm-hmm.
You're already violating federal law, but there's sort of different levels of that violation. Once you go across state lines with that product, bad idea.
That happened with me with a beer. I was in Washington State and wanted to get this one microbrewery beer, and they couldn't ship it to me here in California.
Wow.
I didn't know that existed because
Right.
Coors
Right.
Light, you can get that anywhere, but with a microbrewery, I guess you can't.
Well, and so with the cannabis industry, if you have your product and you're selling Kush, whatever, in California, you could sell it over in Nevada, but you got to grow it there. You got to run under their rules and grow it there, sell it there.
Okay.
You can't distribute it across. But
So every state has their own, what do I say, guidelines
definitely.
in terms of how you grow it
Yes.
and I guess potency or whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
And going back to the should your consumers or listeners buy things from illegal or legal, at the state level, they've put together regulations that require heavy testing on these products, heavier than the food industry for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these licensed places are supposed to have licensed products that have been through this rigorous testing standard. The illegal products have not gone through those standards. You got pesticides and all sorts of materials in there. But yeah, to your point, there's a city regulation and then a state regulation that these companies have to follow.
So when I think about it going forward, and let's say it goes federal one of these days, the FDA is going to put a whole another level that's going to be consistent across all states at that point. Is that how that would work?
Well, at the federal level, I think they're going piece by piece. They're not just going in, although there was recently a federal or a legalization bill that has passed through some of the legislative process. It's got a ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're going to go piece by piece. So there's banking issues, there's tax issues, there's different federal issues. And so they're trying to tackle one at a time. I think banking is probably going to be the first to be tackled with the SAFE Act. That would allow banks to participate in the cannabis industry, which would be a huge help.
Right.
The next one I think that would be great is the tax issue. There's a tax provision 280E. What it says in short is that cannabis businesses cannot deduct their general business expenses. They can't. The only thing they can do is, it's not really a deduction. It's not counted towards your income, but they can take cost of goods sold off. So other than that, yeah, I mean, they have all these expenses that they can't deduct. That's a huge tax burden on these companies. So back to if you're going to invest in the industry, know that they're battling with these issues, banking and this huge tax issue. And until those get resolved, it's going to be a while until revenues are as great as they can be for any other business.
So wait a minute, Cole. I know that the state of California charges a hefty sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you telling me that the dispensaries are also paying federal income tax, but they
Yes.
federally, that's kind of a catch-22, huh?
Well,
You're paying federal tax, but it's
Yeah.
not federally allowed.
Right.
Wow.
So I think there's an old case where it all began. It's actually a cocaine case where somebody was caught with cocaine and they went and deducted all of their expenses for their cocaine business. And at that time, there was not 280E in place. So the tax court is different than the federal criminal court. Remember, they're two different things. So from a tax perspective, they're not going to punish you criminally. They're just going to look if you filed taxes correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what these cannabis companies are doing. They're still trying to file their taxes correctly.
Okay.
But with that cocaine case, he went and deducted all of his expenses, and the tax court said, yeah, he's paying taxes on his business, and he's properly taking these deductions. So then 280E was implemented and said, we're not giving businesses that advantage anymore, illegal businesses that advantage. So yeah, it's two different avenues. Criminal law is one thing, and then tax is another.
I had no idea they had to pay federal tax. I
They
knew
do.
they had to pay state. I figured they had to pay state, but I didn't know
If
they
you're
had to pay
not
federal.
paying federal tax, bad idea.
Right.
You'll be out of business once they find you
Mhm.
fast. If you're paying your taxes, at least you're complying with federal tax law. There's ways to help get that cost of goods sold number up. So for a grower, many of your expenses, if not all of them, go towards the cost of goods. So you can still be okay there, but on the retail end, you don't have very many costs of goods sold. You're leasing your premises for the most part is not a cost of goods sold. So you can't take that deduction, for example. So it's difficult on that end.
So when I think about the illegal dispensaries, not only were they selling pot that wasn't, regulated, but they were also probably avoiding taxes.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So that's who you're competing with.
Yeah.
And so the state, I have clients who have paid millions of dollars in taxes to the state already.
Mm-hmm.
And going to the second issue of what's hindering these companies is even some minor violations of the regulation. They're new. These companies are trying to get up to speed with them. And the state comes in and can hit you hard with inspections and taking your products off the shelves and things like that. That's hard for a company to deal with when it should be, in my opinion, more of a partnership. The company is paying you a bunch of taxes. You got all these illegal companies that are not paying the taxes. They should work with them a little bit, I think, easier, at least in my experience, to resolve these issues and get them in line with the regulations instead of more of an adversarial approach.
Hopefully things get better over time. They probably will.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Some inspections have been on the easier end, but most of them, I think, have been pretty intense.
We were talking about mismanagement of money, and I know MedMen just laid off about 140 employees. Was that the cause, or was it competition, or just consolidation, or what do you think was going on there?
Well, I don't want to call MedMen out individually.
Right.
But, yeah, it's the perfect storm kind of thing between, again,
excessive spending,
mismanagement,
mm-hmm.
crackdown on some issues, and then, as we've discussed, and then generally in the industry, there have been some hits. There was a whole vape lung crisis that came out.
Right.
That said, these pens are going to give you this, I guess, vape lung, and people were getting hospitalized and dying. So that put a huge scare into not just the consumers, so revenues down there, but also the state regulators. So they started cracking down on legal manufacturers and other people who made oil, and that hurt. That hurt the industry, including retailers.
Mm-hmm.
So that is all, again, kind of being resolved. It seems like most of the vape lung is from this vitamin E acetate,
right,
which is primarily from illegal, at least from what has actually been gathered, the information gathered, it's all from illegal producers, manufacturers.
Cole, is there anything that we haven't covered that you think we should talk about real quick?
Well, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that I guess this is just maybe my personal feel on the industry. I've always tried to promote that all of these cannabis companies provide a high level of corporate responsibility. So they should have first the customer in mind, not
Mm-hmm.
making money. If that's driving your decisions, then that's going to help not just you, but the industry, give it the legitimacy that it needs. That's, I think, just kind of what I want to leave with. Every company should be focusing on the consumer as number one.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. It's been a good episode. If you want to get hold of Cole, please email me at eb@wait-what.biz. And you can always call me at 714-643-2500. and I'm on extension, ironically, 420. So call me. Thanks, Cole.
Yeah, thank you.